And one very quick footnote to this debate about renewables and the path that Australia has adopted. We've discovered in so many places around the world, particularly off the coast of the United States, how wind farm plans have been thrown in the garbage bin because not enough was done in the early days to work out whether they were logistically feasible. In other words, were they contradicting various Navy and Air Force frequency zones? Yes, they have been, and so therefore many proposals have not gone ahead after being announced to Americans on those parts of the American coast. And we've had places in Ireland that have had to can various key wind farms as well for similar reasons. And then local communities on Newcastle's coast and also in areas of Scandinavia have also been canned because in the evangelism that you use to promote a wind farm, no one does the due diligence and works out exactly what the drawbacks are. Because it's all part of the evangelism, you see. Well, the same things happen in South Australia. And I'll get to a report that's coming out of the ABC in Australia shortly about the South Australian government rejecting a proposal for an offshore wind farm, a major offshore wind farm, because not enough was done in the early stages to work out the drawbacks. That's what happens with evangelism. Let's go to Canberra right now. I've got Liberal for New South Wales Senator Hollie Hughes with me. Hollie, hello.
Good afternoon. How are
I'm
we?
very well. Did you enjoy yourself in question time? Is it always that enjoyable? Like we only see the highlights on the news. It looks enjoyable to me.
Yes, look, sometimes it can be a bit fun. It's mainly the theatre of the day. I think I got called out by the president, 5 times this question time. So I may have been the MVP today. You just never know for interjections.
Good. Hand the woman a certificate, please. All right. One person who'll be taking off with his certificate and about $10 to $20 million is Qantas CEO Alan Joyce. He's jumped out of the aircraft 2 months prior to his scheduled departure. He was a managerial wreck for most of the last 6 months. He made decisions and then went back on the decisions and then make other decisions and went back on those decisions. He was ducking and weaving. He was looking shabby. Thank goodness he's gone, I say.
Well, it's probably the first time anything at Qantas has departed early in many, many years. And I'm yet to see if it's a typical Qantas departure and is delayed significantly, if not cancelled, because the performance of Qantas has been woeful. Yep. Only on Sunday, a lot of us coming back to Canberra for the sitting week. I think the flight before mine that was cancelled, then mine was cancelled, and then a whole lot of us were bundled onto the next flight. But it was a Dash 8 that we were all sort of bundled onto, and the flight that I was supposed to be on before, I know was going to be a jet. So they're even sort of getting rid of the big planes and putting more of the smaller ones, which I assume are cheaper for them to run as well, into the air.
It's a little bit like running trains. The old Premier of New South Wales, Neville Rand, said if you can't run trains on time, you can't run the state. And the same thing happens with an airline. Labor Senator Tony Sheldon has called for the resignation of Qantas Chairman Richard Goyder as well. The company has a lot of trust and faith to win back, don't they?
Absolutely. And I understand Mr. Goyder has said that he won't be doing that. I almost felt sorry for Tony Sheldon in question time today. I don't know who he's upset in caucus, but he was actually given one of the dixes for him to ask his own minister with regards to Qantas and supportive of them. And there has never been anyone more critical of Qantas than Tony Sheldon. I mean, the whole decision and everything that this Labor government's doing and hiding behind its decision to stop Qatar Airways coming in and increasing their flights, which would reduce the costs for Australians that want to fly internationally, as well as encourage more people to come into the country. But it's just extraordinary in the way that this government has provided a protection racket for Qantas. Obviously, the relationship between Joyce and Prime Minister Albanese is incredibly close, and that he is just doing their bidding. The responses we got in question time today from questions from Senator McKenzie literally sounded like Qantas talking points. It was embarrassing, and the government should be embarrassed by this decision. Minister Wong couldn't even explain what the national grounds were that this decision was made on. It was embarrassing for them. As it continues to be so across so many areas.
Yeah, and Anthony Albanese today would not answer the question as to whether he communicated with Alan Joyce over the Qatar decision, which, for those who don't know, would restrict Qatar from adding an additional, I think it was 43 additional flights in and out of Australia. Now, normally you would celebrate that, Hollie. You would say, thank you for the business travel. Thank you for the tourism opportunities. Come in, come out, fly as much as you possibly can. How many airports do you want? But no. And I get the feeling, let's call it as I see it, I get the feeling that a sweetheart deal was done because of Alan Joyce's support for various political campaigns, including the yes vote for the Voice referendum.
Well, one of my interjections today was that perhaps if Qatar Airways put a yes sticker on the back of their plane, they might get the routes that they're looking for and access to Australian airports, because there hasn't been a woke cause that Alan Joyce hasn't jumped on.
Spot on.
And, you know, they do have a PR disaster. Thank God he has gone. I think it's indicative of how people feel about him that he announces he's leaving and the share price goes up. And I think they've still got a long way to go. I mean, I very rarely bring carry. I only bring carry on to Canberra and don't check bags. Last year, at the end of the year, I checked a bag, which was pretty much empty for me to bring things home for the end of the year. And they managed to lose at Sydney to Canberra. I mean, it's just pathetic. And even the guy at the lost baggage, when I went over and went, you know, and he said, where'd you transfer from? I went, mate, it was one flight, Sydney to Canberra. And he went, oh, that's not good. So even their own staff are starting to roll their eyes at the massive capability failures that are just being seen across the board in Qantas's service delivery. Yet this government is providing a protection racket for them to be able to keep their fares as high as possible.
Yeah, it's outrageous. Now, it's interesting. I've been watching The Voice. We know now that there are 38%, according to news polls, supportive of the yes vote. As I've said from the beginning, I actually think this will crash even more than what the polls are telling us about. It's interesting that we now have, sadly, one of the great songs in Australian musical history dedicated to the yes vote. Now, I'm supportive of John Farnham, one of our great singers, expressing his opinion in song. But what is sad for a fan of John Farnham is the fact that he's used his songs for political reasons. Not on.
No. Can I tell you something else I found out last night, which I still have a giggle about every time I think about it? When The Voice was released as a single, and I know you and I are old enough to remember the small records that you had side A and side B, the B side was a song called Going, Going, Gone. So on one side, you've got The Voice, try to understand it. I mean, it's almost like it's a song for the No campaign, but on the B side was Going, Going, Gone. And to me, it just sums it up perfectly. I want to read you a letter to the editor from Alan Sexton from North Parramatta in the Telegraph today. While glossing over the fine details and ignominiously rushing headlong into the uncharted waters of constitutional change for The Voice, it is surely with equal folly that the Yes campaign has recruited John Farnham's song, You're the Voice. The song is surely a Trojan horse for the Yes campaign, with recurring lyrics lampooning the critical aspects of their case. Quote, we have a chance to turn the pages. Reminds us that the Uluru Statement isn't just one page. You're the Voice, try to understand it. Warns us that no one's trying to explain anything and we have to vote on trust. We are not giving or going to live in fear. Surely explains why no one will vote yes. This song is ringing the death knell for The Voice, a suicidal demise actually constructed with the same elite disregard for communication of facts, which the constitutional process was supposed to improve. That's a cracker. That's so good.
Yeah.
And it's so true. But I've got someone, as you've shared on your program before, I'm about to get married, and I've just sent a text to the performer, the singer that I have, who actually does a fantastic version of The Voice, and just suggested to him that not be on the playlist potentially at the wedding, considering I'm an active no campaign.
Yes. Watch your P's and Q's and your voice at the same. The bells have rung. That means that Senator Hollie Hughes has to jump into the Senate chamber because there's some kind of division on some kind of debate or policy that needs to be voted on. And as you know, the Liberal Party in the Senate doesn't have the majority, so they've got to take all the numbers they can possibly get when it comes to voting. And so Hollie's had to leave her office in Canberra's Parliament House and jump into the chamber. So we've lost her at this stage. I did want to discuss some IR laws, which are causing all kinds of headaches for big business. They estimate today that big business will pay an additional $9 billion in wages over a year because of industrial relations reforms put in place by the Labor government. You see, when it comes to the Labor government, it's all about helping their union mates. It's all about dishing out bigger pay packets, not because of productivity. No. You wouldn't want to pay someone based on what they produced. You'd want to pay someone because of what government was in power in Canberra. That's what they do each and every time. And they're doing it again to the tune of $9 billion. How is that a reform? When I think of reform, I think of something that can be more productive, that can be more beneficial, not just to those who work in the industry, but to employers as well. Because when it's not advantageous to employers, what happens? They can't employ the same number of people. It's tougher to make the same profit, so they get rid of positions. So it's like, cutting your nose off to spite your face. You go into bat for your union mate so that people can get bigger pay packets, but there aren't as many jobs when this is all said and done because they're having to fork out $9 billion to sustain these additional wage rises. Just numbskull stuff.